So all good to go. Hi everyone. Just want to welcome Tania Chandler to our group today. So thanks so much for joining us, Tania. Tania's a Melbourne-based writer, a writing teacher and an editor. And All That I Remember About Dean Kohler is her third novel. So I'll just share there we go. Hopefully you can see that all good. And just want to say thanks to Scribe Publishers. If anyone asks a question during the Facebook Live, they'll have a chance to win All That I Remember About Dean Kohler. So welcome, Tania. Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your latest book.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's fantastic that we can do this with so many events being cancelled. So it's wonderful. Okay, so my novel, All That I Remember About Dean Kohler, funnily enough, isn't anything really to do with, well, it is to do with Dean Kohler, but it's not about Dean Kohler. It's about a woman called Sydney who lives with diverse mental health. So it's written in two timelines. So we meet Sydney first when she's in her 30s and then again later when she's a 16-year-old girl. So the story starts with Sydney coming home from hospital, not for the first time, to her house in Melbourne, which she shares with her husband, Christoph. So, and then she discovers, among other things, forgotten things in a box, a poem that she wrote when she was 16 for somebody called Dean Kohler, who was her teenage crush. Not long after, she decides to stop taking her medications and slowly she becomes preoccupied with Dean Kohler and what happened to him, which is kind of about what happened to her, really. So some of her memories of Dean are good, some are bad, some are completely lost due to her illness and its treatments over the years. And then when her mother dies, Sydney goes back to her childhood home at a place called Broken River Road, which is in the country town where she grew up. And I forgot to mention that the poem was written on the back of a diary page that had been torn out, so it was just one page. So when she goes back home to her estranged mother's house, she finds the rest of her diary. And in it, she discovers some things that are pretty traumatic. And then in the middle of the novel, we see her back in psychiatric care. We see her as a 16-year-old girl living in the parochial country town through diary entries and some sort of different narratives that I've used to show her as a young girl. So it's a very different place, I guess. So Sydney's 16, living in this big old house on the river with her single mother. And it's not a great place for a young girl to grow up or come of age, as we say. There's this kind of seething undercurrent of misogyny and sexism and this competitiveness with the boys as well as the girls. So leading up to an event that was really traumatic, and it was the trigger for her very first breakdown that saw her end up in hospital, and she thinks that Dean Kohler was involved, but she's not really sure. So I don't want to give away too much of what happens after that. It's quite a hard book to talk about without giving the ending away. But I will say that our hero does survive to, discover the truth that will set her free.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, what was the first thought you had when you first started to look at writing this book?
Well, it's interesting. This book came to me not so much as character or story. All my books have been different. This was like an essence, I guess. It's really hard to explain. I just had a feeling and an essence of what I wanted to write about. I actually bought a little bit of show and tell. I thought you might ask me what inspired the book. And I remember it was the weekend, I was writing my second book. So I was deep in that. And then I got this idea for Dean Kohler, and it's like, no, I can't write you now because I have to finish this other book, but it wouldn't leave me alone. And it came to me one weekend when I was in Hobart with my partner, and we visited Mona, the Museum of Old and New Art, I think it stands for. And I was drawn to a couple of pieces of artwork. One was, you probably know it, the weird cloaca machine. I think it's also known as the poo machine, but it's in this kind of dark, dingy room, and it's this apparatus that's kind of part surgical, almost alien-like. And I just remember looking at it, thinking, that's all we are. This is kind of, but completely soulless. So it's like the sum of our parts. It's just really weird. And there was this other piece of art that I'm going to show you. This sculpture. Can you see?
Oh, yes.
Picture?
Yeah.
So this was at Mona at the same time, and it's a sculpture of a girl about 8 or 9. It's a replica made out of silicon, and I was really drawn to this. I know most of the people were walking away in disgust. So this little girl in her Philly party dress, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, in a coffin, and she's got these mice crawling around her that are surviving by drinking her saliva, which is water that comes from this pump underneath. So it's really quite creepy. But I was just fascinated, and like I said, everyone else was walking away. So then I became a bit obsessed with the artist, and I listened to an interview, and I realised that I was so drawn to this. The artist's work, her name's Megan Booty, and she described her artwork, this sculpture, it's a replica of herself as an 8 or 9-year-old child. And the interviewer asked her if it was creepy to sculpt a face in your likeness, and she said, "Well, no, not really. It's nostalgic." And she lived in an apartment in New York and had this kind of strange idea of what it would be like if she could look up at her old bedroom window and see herself as a child looking back out at her. So it's an ode to staying young forever, which is kind of what Seeing Colour is in a way. So then back at my postal room, I've got it written down in my journal. I want to write a novel that infuses the two ideas that we're more than the sum of our parts, and an ode to staying young forever. So that was the very initial idea that sparked the book. And initially I wanted to explore madness simply, but then I did a lot of research into different kinds of psychotic disorders, in particular schizophrenia. And the more that I researched, the less I wanted to write, kind of a mad person does a bad thing kind of novel. So I wanted to write the opposite, something that, helps to destigmatise mental illness or neurodiversity, and break the stereotype of a crazy person. And it's people with mental illness that are more evil, often perpetuated by the media, more evil than the general population. So it was really important for me to do that.
And you said, like, it is a very traumatic book, talking about traumatic things. How was that to write it? Like, how was your mind when you were writing it? Did you find it upsetting sometimes, or?
It was a really difficult book to write. Sometimes it's quite uncomfortable to go into, and I guess I'm what you would call a method writer, which means a bit like method acting. So you kind of take on a little bit of your character. So I wanted to know or to feel how Sydney felt, and to do the things that she did. So, you kind of listen to the music that your character listens to, or do the things that they do. So Sydney keeps bonsai. So I went and did a bonsai course. And she is also a burns victim, and I bought compression gloves so I would know what that felt like. And the trickiest thing, I guess, for me was my own mental health, I guess, suffered a lot while I was writing this. So I was quite unwell towards the end, but I thought it was actually helping me write this book. Not a really healthy way to write, I think. But,
yeah, I can imagine.
It's hard. People often ask if it was hard to write Sydney, and I think it wasn't really. What was hard was once I was inside her head and writing it, it's really hard to come out. So you kind of lose yourself a little bit while you're writing, and it's
And did you feel like at the end when you finished, you sort of had to take a break and step away from it? And
I found it really hard to let go of. Actually, I finally started writing again, but I found it quite hard to write for a while. But part of me didn't want to go back into sort of immersing myself so deeply into the work. And another part it was so hard to let go. I loved Sydney so much, and I loved this book. And I was thinking about it. It was kind of more than love. It was, I think it's more like the, here Stockholm syndrome, where the hostage falls in love with their captor. It was kind of like that. So I still kind of find it hard to let go of.
Yeah.
But slowly letting go.
Yeah. And we've got quite a few people watching now, which is really great. Just reminding people watching that if they have a question for Tania, type it in comments. And thanks to Scribe Publishing, you'll have a chance to win a copy of All That I Remember About Dean Kohler. So I've got a few questions from some people. Mary wonders if you have any authors who inspire your writing.
I like the work of Margaret Atwood.
Yeah.
I love, as an Australian author, I love Charlotte Wood. Another favourite author that inspire my work. Look, I do really like the work of Richard Flanagan as well, an Australian author. And when I was writing Dean Kohler, I had the journal of Sylvia Plath, and every night I only let myself read one page of her journal. So her work was really inspirational for this book, and it's a really thick journal.
Oh, okay.
It took a long time to write the book, and it took me a long time to read the journal.
Yeah. And Jill's wondering if you're working on another book at the moment.
I have just started working on another book. As I said, it took me a long time to sort of start to move away from Dean. And I still feel like I'm not attached to this new work. But in a way, it's kind of good because I think I was too attached to Dean Kohler. So I'm just waiting to see, if I'm going to fall in love with it. It's based on a Grimm's fairy tale, for adults. It's a realistic book that it kind of comes from a fairy tale, and I've kind of gone with it there.
Yeah. Belinda's wondering if you can tell us some more about the research you did for All That I Remember About Dean Kohler.
Yeah, I did a lot of research for All That I Remember About Dean Kohler, a lot of different things. Initially, I thought I was going to be writing about Dean's grandfather, who was called Obel Kohler. So my initial work was about the parallel lives and breakdowns of Sydney and Obel Kohler. And he was an Italian immigrant who came to Tasmania to work on the hydroelectricity scheme. I don't know why. I think because I spent that time in Tasmania. So I did all this research on the hydro post-World War II that I never used. The grandfather still makes a little bit of an appearance in the book, but then I became more interested in his grandson. So I did a lot of research on that for starters. As far as the main theme, the mental illness aspects, it was so important to get that right. So I do have my own mental health issues. They're very different to Sydney's, but I did use it, a little bit of my own experience, as well as the experiences of some people that I've been close to over the years. And I did a lot of reading of reports and non-fiction, medical things, as well as people's memoirs and interviews. I did interviews, both sides, with people living with schizophrenia as well as psychiatrists. I did a course in caring for people with psychosis and schizophrenia. What else did I do? And in the end, I still, even after all that, I went and employed a sensitivity reader who has this experience, who is now a really good friend of mine. So that was really nice. We still catch up for coffee. So she read it for me and gave me feedback if there was anything that was that wasn't ringing true or might upset people. So that was really important to do. Sydney's also a burn victim, so I got in touch with an occupational therapist who specialises in burns care, and she was really, really helpful, answered all my questions, directed me to the training videos that they use to help rehabilitate burn survivors and burns care. And I bought the type of compression gloves that you wear, so I could feel what it was like on my hands and how it might restrict movement, and also, how people would react. It affects everything, how could you swipe on your phone, or, how you need to protect burns in the sun and things like that. Sydney's husband, Christos, is a firefighter, so that was really important for me to get right as well. So I got in touch with an MFB fire brigade firefighter, and he, showed me what it was like inside the truck. And I had a lot of stupid questions. But if Sydney was his wife, I needed to know, stupid things like, do you wash your own clothes, or do you send them to the dry cleaner? What would happen if I looked in your wardrobe? What would I see? As well, right down to things like what colour flames would I expect to see in different kinds of fires. What our bonsai, Sydney keeps bonsai, so I went and did a bonsai course. That was one fun part of the research, but unfortunately I don't have a green thumb like Sydney does. She's very disappointed to know that my bonsai died.
Oh, no.
So lots of stuff. So as well as that, I had to find out about Greek traditions and art therapy, all sorts of stuff. You learn so much when you're writing a book. It kind of gives you an excuse to go and find out. And I spent time finishing off the book. Well, I called it a writing retreat, but it wasn't really. It was this shack out in the middle of nowhere up near the Goulburn River in the middle of Victoria. So I went up there for a week, and there was no internet or washing machine, and just, the truck skiering down up on the highway, and the flies. It was great.
No, well, it certainly sounds like you did a very lot of research and a very wide range of research. I'm interested to know, with all that research you did in that, how long did the book actually take you to write?
From the initial idea that I had that weekend in Hobart to final submission, it was 5 years altogether. But I wasn't working on it I don't work on it full time. Altogether 5 years. And then, there's the editing and
after,
stuff that happens after that.
Jill's wondering if you've always wanted to be an author.
Yes and no. When I was little, I did. When I was very young, and I always writing stories. And I think that's what I wanted to be. As I got older, I decided that I wanted to be an actor, and that's probably the only occupation that comes with more rejection than being an author. And then when my kids were quite little, and they were just about to go off to kinder, I think, or kinder, one of them going off to school, my partner said, what is it that you really want to do? So at that point I said, I want to write. I've always wanted to write. So I went and did writing and editing course, thinking that I would come out being an editor and kind of put the creative writing aside, but I kind of signed up for more creative writing than editing, and ended up secretly writing a book.
And are you an editor for a publisher?
Not now. I worked for a place very similar to the place in Sydney. Not that it was based on real life, but I worked with a corporate editor for a while. I worked in educational publishing as an editor as well. And now, look, it's not something that I pursue so much, but word of mouth, and occasionally I'll work on fiction manuscripts or do little jobs here and there. But as I said, it's not something that I really pursue. I teach more than I edit now.
Yeah. And I've got a couple of people asking about what you like to read. Jill's wondering if you've got a favourite genre you like to read. And I'm wondering if there is anything you might have been reading lately you'd like to recommend to us.
Yeah. I guess I probably read mainly literary fiction. Although I've just read a really good book that was a crime book called The Newcomer by Laura Elizabeth Woolwich. That was, look, I'm not sure that I'd call it crime. It's one of those books that could be either. So that was amazing. And I also read a book called The Believer, which is a non-fiction book by Sarah Krisnowstein, who wrote The Trauma Cleaner. I thought that was fantastic as well. So they're the two most recent books I've read, and also a book called The Animals in That Country by Laura Jean McKay. That was amazing.
Okay. Thanks for those recommendations. Belinda's wondering, out of all of your books, do you have a favourite character to write?
Yeah, it would be Sydney.
It was Sydney,
Of Dean Kohler,
Yeah.
I love Sydney.
And Patricia's wondering if you have a strict writing regime.
No, not really. Look, it varies for me. My first book, I kind of wrote it out of love, and I didn't have a publishing contract, and so I had to make time. My kids were little. I remember that's when I started my routine of getting up at 5 o'clock. So I still do the really early morning writing sessions when I'm writing. So I started getting up at 5 so I could write before the kids got up. And I wrote because I wanted to write rather than a strict writing regime. For my second book, I did have a tight deadline, so I had to be a bit stricter with that. So I let myself have 1 or 2 days going to the library to work on that. Again, with Dean Kohler, it's been just out of love, and I've just found the time rather than, wanting to do it. At the moment, I'm struggling with what I'm writing, and I've joined a writing group. So we meet. It was meant to be for lockdown. It might be for a long time. I've finished the whole novel. Actually, so every morning, even on the weekends, we meet at 7, so a bit later on the weekends. We talk about what we're going to write, then we just go away and write for an hour, then come back and talk about what we did. So there's no feedback or anything like that for each other, but it's just kind of this collective energy, I guess, of writing, and it's been really helpful. So I've not done anything like that before. I usually just work on my own and in my own time, but I think I kind of needed it to get started.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Were they authors you already knew, or how did the group come about?
Yeah, one was. And they're both children's book authors, which is interesting. So very different. So it's kind of fun. One's an illustrator, but now we've got a few other people who I know who are novelists as well.
Yeah. And Kelly's wondering if the COVID lockdowns have helped or hindered your writing process.
The first one, I would say, hindered. I found it very hard to write, to do anything really, anything creative, and I was finishing off Dean then, so it wasn't a good time. But this time, at the moment, I don't know if it'll last. I'm having a bit of a creative burst, I guess, writing, doing some photography, which I've found a bit of an interest in, and lots of creative stuff, or kind of all at once, too much.
Yeah.
But I find that it does come in spurts, and at some stage it'll kind of dry up, and I'll just have to walk away for a bit, and then hopefully it'll come back.
Yeah. And what do you do to recharge and relax when you're not writing?
Well, at the moment, the only thing really is walking.
Yeah.
Walking, put in the headphones and go for a walk. Normally, I always think exercise is the best thing. So I do like to get to the gym, but that's closed.
Yeah.
And just before lockdown, I thought that I would rediscover my childhood passion for ice skating. I discovered that in the new house they've moved into, there's an ice skating rink. It's like 5 minutes away. I couldn't believe it. So it was a bit scary though. I haven't skated since I was little. So when you're older, you have this fear of falling, so that you don't have when you were little. So I signed up for lessons actually, and I've had one lesson and then lockdown. I imagine myself skating. When lockdown's finished, I'll be back.
Yeah. Patricia's wondering if there's a piece of advice you could give an aspiring writer.
I think it's really important to finish what you start. I think the most important thing is the first draft we write of anything is always going to be bad, always crap, and that's when a lot of people give up, because you write something and it sounds terrible, or you try and fix it and edit it as you go. But it's really important to just push through and get those words down. And once you have a full manuscript, or if it's a short story you're working on, that's when you can come back, and that's when you can shape it and craft it and do all the fun stuff. But that first draft, I know that people give up on that, or they get stuck in it. And so really important to just push through and know that everybody writes rubbish first drafts. I call it the vomit draft or draft zero. And no one's going to see it, but you just have to push through and then know that you'll come back and make it better.
Yeah. And Kelly's wondering, who is your greatest fan?
My greatest fan? I would say that would probably be my partner, Greg. I'm not sure about my kids.
Are your kids a bit too young to read the book, or are they an age that could read the book?
One is old enough to read it. I think two are probably old enough to read it. One's still a little bit young.
Jamie's wondering where it's set.
It's set partly in Melbourne and partly in an unnamed country town in country Victoria that I don't name. I just call it back home.
Yeah.
But it's based on a realish place. I probably shouldn't say.
Yeah. Leanne's wondering where you came up with the name Dean Kohler.
Oh, okay. That's it's interesting. So I have that character name. I keep actually I don't really keep a book. It's more in my mind. Sometimes names just come to me and I think, oh, well, I've thought of that for some reason. Now I'll wait for a character to come along that will suit that name. Sounds really weird, but I'm sure writers do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I had Dean Kohler on the list. And then one day I was talking to my mum, and when I was little, we did live in a house on the river, which is a lot like the house in the book. And I said, oh, remember that black and white cat that we used to have? Its name was Collingwood. I'm sure its name was Collingwood. And Mum said, no, its name was Coca-Cola, but we used to call it Coke. So I'm thinking I've consciously named my character after a childhood.
I'm wondering what you hope readers will love about your book.
I hope that they will love Sydney, and I hope that they will go with her and, feel, I guess there are parts that broke my heart writing it, but I hope that they will go along with it, and I hope that they will love that at the end there's redemption and there's hope, and I hope that they will love that part of it, and I hope that they'll see that, we can survive things and we can live with our disorders and things like that, and make a life. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. And how have you have you had any readers reach out to you to say that what the subject is about has really touched them, or they can relate to that? Is that something that's resounded to people?
Yeah, I have had a few people actually.
Yeah.
It's really special and really meaningful to me. So that was lovely to hear.
Mm.
Yeah. So I have had a few people just on social media, I guess, and
Yeah.
also in reviews. Some people have written reviews talking about their own mental health and how they can relate to Sydney. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. And talking about reviews, wonder how much you read your reviews and take in what the reviews say. And
Well, you say that you won't, but you always do. And I'd never remember a word of the good reviews, but I could tell you word for word any of the bad reviews. Yes.
And Sue says, do you have any quirky routines that you use when you start writing a new story?
At the moment, I am writing a book and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I've got a deck of tarot cards, and I started by just choosing a card and saying, okay, what does this mean? I don't really understand this. Well, I don't understand the tarot at all, but I'm surprised by the archetypes that you find in the tarot cards, and they kind of fit in with my story. So I'll draw a card and look up what it means and see if that can somehow guide me in the story.
And
I'm not sure how that will go.
Have you found that helped at all?
Yeah, it did. It's almost like a writing exercise prompt. And now that I'm getting further along, I'll come back and manipulate it so it fits in with the story. But the tarot cards do fit in with the story that I'm writing. I do have a character who was a bit of a dodgy fortune teller, so they will work in.
Yeah. And Margaret says, have you ever read any reviews that really surprised you?
That surprised me. I'm sure I have. I'm just trying to think of one off the top of my head. I don't know about surprised, but just surprised by how I'm thinking of Goodreads reviews, which is like a community review place where anyone can go, and authors really shouldn't go there. It's more for readers, not for writers. And people talk about like your first person narrative on a book that's written in third person, or they'll get names wrong, and it's like, did they really read the book? No, probably not. I'm sure I'll think of something after. I would think of these things after the interview. I'm sure there have been really surprising things.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll keep thinking.
I'm wondering, when you start writing, do you always know the end?
Yeah, pretty much I do. I think, I know a lot of people don't. And in my first book, I wasn't really sure, and that led to all sorts of problems. So I think if you not know the ending, but have an idea of, or a vague kind of idea of what's going to happen, it gives you something to work towards. So, you can put up obstacles for your characters along the way before they get to that ending. So pretty much I do. For some reason, I do get a picture of how it's going to end in my mind. Sometimes it changes. It's not always how it ends up, but with seeing Cole, I think I always knew how it was going to end.
Well, just checking if anyone else has any more questions before we finish off. And just while we wait to see if there's any more questions, Tania, do you want to tell people how they can keep in touch with you?
Probably I like Instagram best. So you can just look up Tania Chandler Writes on Instagram. I don't use Facebook so much, but I do have an author page, and I've sort of started using my personal page more, but that's okay. That's Tan Chandler, because you have to have an author page and a personal page. So one's Tania, one's Tan, and also on Twitter. So it's always Tania Chandler.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Been great chatting to you, and hope everyone goes out and has a look at your book. I really enjoyed it, and I have to say there was a bit of a surprise at the end. So thanks everybody, and thanks everyone who joined in, and we had some really, really great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye everybody.